One player must step up his play next season if the White Sox are to win even the stereotypical 60 games. Let's discuss who that is next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the FanSided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, and also follow or subscribe to the show at wherever you get your podcasts. Well, I hate to put the hopes of the team improving their lineup on just one player, but in the case of the White Sox, well, that is the case, as I'll discuss why Luis Robert Jr. is a player who must improve if the Sox hope to win the cliche 60 games next season. Then the White Sox signed a free agent, minor move, but a good one that I'll discuss, even if Austin Slater had a terrible season. And then finally, let's discuss who the front office must add to the 40-man roster today to avoid exposing to the Rule 5 draft. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Okay, so on its face, you could say Andrew Benintendi and Andrew Vaughn should join Luis Robert Jr. as players who must step up if the White Sox are to at least get back to 61 wins. And that's sad, but hey, after you only win 41 games, you should think 61 games as an improvement. So that's got to be the hope in 2025. At least that should be the expectation. I want to see those Sox, as sad as it sounds, win at least 61 games next season. But the Andrews, they just exist, okay? They're just there. They're filler. They're empty calories. They represent a previous leadership group that foolishly believed they could be part of a championship core. And everydayers have heard me even argue, Vaughn should be non-tendered. He's nothing more than a replacement level player. And you could say, how dare you say that? I was leading the charge for Andrew Vaughn going to be an all-star player in 2024. And this isn't being sour grapes. This is just facing reality. Looking at 4 seasons of work, he's just a replacement level player. That's all he is. And at first base, for $6.1 million, you can find replacement level for a couple $1 million cheaper. And guys that might have trade value. So also, those two's terrible first half, 2024's, they were awful, and they helped the Sox get on a trajectory to lose 121 games. But in the second half, they actually raised their games. They played better. You know, Andrew Benintendi suddenly is a power hitter, and the Sox still lost 121 games. So even if they raised their play, you've seen in context, they still lost an historic 121 games. So we've seen what they can do when they produce and raise their games. But Luis Robert Jr., on the other hand, had a miserable 2024 season, but he had a MVP caliber 2023 season. And ironically, maybe it's just, I don't know if that, is just a weird correlation, but the Sox at least won 61 games. And when you put it in the context, obviously, of in 2023 in a vacuum, that's still terrible. But when you compare it to 2024, we're dreaming of those days again. We've seen what his stepping up can produce. And even if it is a 61-win season, you and I would greet a 61-101 season after enduring 2024 with a parade. We would. I'd be throwing confetti, setting off fireworks in my backyard. If the Sox could get back to the stereotypical, you're guaranteed to win 60, you're guaranteed to lose 60. It's what you do with the other 42 that counts. And obviously, Luis Robert Jr. having an MVP caliber season in 2023 only meant that the Sox went 1-41 in those, other 42 that counts, but at least they could be applied. I mean, remember, the Sox were so bad this year, so historically awful, that you couldn't even apply standard baseball logic to this team. You couldn't even apply cliches and stereotypes of when it comes to winning. And yes, Robert Jr., though, has to step up his game again. He's got to get back to those 2023 levels because his 2024 season was terrible. 224, 278, 379 slash line, 14 home runs, 84 WRC plus, and finished as a .5 F4 player in 100 games. He had a 33.2 K rate, .155 ISO, and he was a -6.8 offensive WAR F4 player. Now compare that if he raises his game, even if he gets somewhere in between the 2023 season when he had a 264, 315, 542 slash line, 38 dingers, 128 WRC plus, 4.9 F4 in 145 games. Now, he was finally healthy, and he had a 20.2 offensive F4 rating and a .278 ISO. So right there, you need Luis Robert Jr. to avoid a lengthy IL stint because he missed 62 games with that hip injury, and you could tell that he was still a little bit hurting, and it was really affecting his timing. And clearly the losing drained on him. So he's got to stay healthy, and he's got to be able to overcome this losing culture. Maybe Chris Getz can paint him that vision that he's sold impressive baseball minds such as new manager Will Venable or new director of hitting Adam Fuller to come here, because those two have cited the vision that Chris Getz has painted for us of why they're coming here. Apparently something is rosy that these guys can see. Now, granted, they don't have to actually get in front of a pitcher who can throw 100 miles an hour, but they're able to see something that Chris Getz is selling. They're able to see the vision. So maybe a sit down with Luis Robert Jr. is warranted, but something's got to be done, because if he's not going right, 2025 will be another season where the Sox win total is probably in the 40s. And he was so poor in 2024 that his OPS dropped 200 points, 857 in 2023, 657 in 2024. And he's always at least, yes, he's been hurt, except for 2023. But even when he's been available, he usually puts an OPS above the average 700. 700 is average if you think about it. His barrels went from 58 in 2023 to 25 in 2024. A 15.2% barrel rate in 2023 dropped to 9.8. About the only thing that he maintained some consistency in was the hard hit percentage. 41.7 in 2023, dipped to just 40.6 last year. But here's another reason why he's got to step up and get back to being an all-star. 2023, his win probability added, his WPA, was 2.69. So every time he was in the lineup, he added into the potential chances of the White Sox winning. This year was 0.03. Okay, so this is a guy that can factor into helping you win. May only be 61 games, because when he was in 2021, remember, he was hurt a little bit. So he was there, but he wasn't the reason why they were winning a lot of games. But when he's available and he's going right, he's going to help you win ball games. When he's going terrible, it's one of the many reasons on the Dead Sea Scroll size list of reasons why the Sox only won 41 games. Think about it. Defensively, too, he dipped from 6 defensive runs saved and 13 outs above average in 2023 to one defensive run saved and 1 outs above average. So I don't know if he needs to bring in his trainer like he did in 2023 that helped him break out, because remember, he was in a little bit of a slump, too, to start the 2023 season. It was one of the reasons why we should have really put on the flashing, blinking warning signs that Pedro Grifol was a terrible manager when Luis Robert Jr. had to go outside the organization to help identify what he was doing wrong and when he needed to do better. And then you get an almost MVP caliber season. But you got to get him back on track to produce at all-star levels. Or else, again, you're flirting with losing less than 60 games. Especially since the team is likely to go cheap in free agency. And I'll discuss a cheap signing that they just made in the next segment. They're also going to be giving players who just got to the majors like Brian Ramos, Corey Lee, Dominic Fletcher, and Brooks Baldwin to round out their lineup. So you're going to have some inconsistency because that's part of the learning curve. Not everybody is just comes up and be's a stud. Paul Skeens is a rarity and he's a pitcher. Usually pitchers can maintain some consistency. Hitters, not everybody's Jackson Merrill. Some folks are. Jackson Churio, mentioned the Brewers drink. But he got off to a slow start, and then he ended up finishing 3rd in the NL Rookie of the Year voting. So the Sox have got to get a consistent effort from their best player, and talent-wise, LRJ is still their best player, talent-wise. just has to be healthy, and he's got to get re-engaged. And I know I've said in the past that he's a supporting cast character, really. And ideally, he's probably your number 2 or number 3 like guy. He's proven, in 2024, obviously he's proven maybe he's not the face of a franchise, but he still provides so much value when he's going right that they need him to step up. And also, if the Sox plan to trade him, and I'm actually no longer opposed to that, only because he's a Scott Boras guy. So even though he's secured through 2027, you're not going to have him secured long-term when the team is hopefully ready to win, which is by 2027. That's when he would be on his last option year. And right now, though, I don't think you should trade him because you still could get a decent return. Some teams will be backing on a bounce-back change of scenery. Dylan Cease, still got a very good return, I think, but it wasn't like, I would say, 125 or 150% markup value. And that's what the Sox need to get if you're going to trade Luis Robert Jr. Because in terms of valuable F4 type guys that, push you to winning more games, you only got Luis Robert Jr. and Garrett Crochet. And if you're going to trade both of them, then you've got nothing in the cupboard in terms of like those types of guys. You got a whole bunch of what ifs and unknowns. And hey, what ifs and unknowns can be exciting, but it could also be another, 50 losses. And again, I think the standard should be, can you at least get back to 61 wins, even though that's sad. But you need him to reclaim his all-star status if you are going to even get back to that 61 win plateau, that win target. Well, the White Sox signed a free agent outfielder, Austin Slater, yesterday. Nothing to be excited about, but I'll discuss why it's a good signing next on Locked On White Sox. Hey, I've seen Michael Jordan and LeBron James drop 55 live and in person. Heck, I've even seen Brandon Jennings and Michael Redd drop that many points. Catching a basketball game live is the best way to go, and I suggest using the Gametime app for your ticket needs. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Gametime Pick filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And Gametime Picks makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so that way you make sure that you're getting the best view possible. The lowest price guarantee or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Hey, right now I'm monitoring the last-minute market for the Purdue and Marquette game tonight, as I'm still trying to convince my wife, hey, it's worth seeing two good college programs battle it out in November. And one way I can do that is showing her great deals on the app. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today, because what time is it? Game time. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. Well, the cheap veteran signings for a 121-loss team has begun. And the Sox signed veteran outfielder Austin Slater to a one-year deal pending a physical, and he did have a miserable 2024 season. But at the same time, this is the perfect scrap heap deal for the White Sox, especially if they want a platoon in right field this season with Dominic Fletcher. Slater has a history of crushing left-handed pitching, and since he swings right-handed, you get to balance out Fletcher's left-handed bat, and both of them can catch the ball very well in the outfield. So this is why it's a great signing. Although you might ask, Todd, how is a 209, 321, 266 slash line with a 76 WRC plus, a minus 0.1 F4, and just 2 dingers be a good signing? How can that be? Context, people. Remember, context should matter. First, the Sox are tapping into Fuller's connections with the new director of hitting, Adam Fuller's connections to Slater, which I'd prefer to grab a guy with ties to the front office, to a front office person who played for the San Francisco Giants and the Baltimore Orioles. I'd rather do that than say, guys that played with the Kansas City Royals before the Kansas City Royals got good again. I'd rather tap into guys like Austin Slater and maybe not guys like Mike Moustakas. That's just me, you know? And once he did come to Baltimore via trade, and he came to Baltimore via trade with the Reds, he slashed 246, 342, 333, a 102 WRC plus overall. This is on MLB Trade Rumors. This is what they pulled. And he posted a 114 WRC plus against left-handed hitters. So he did get to Baltimore, and he started to produce much better because he was having a miserable season. He wasn't playing very good for the Giants. They gave up on him, traded him to the Reds. And that says a lot because the Giants, gave him an expanded role in 2021 through 2023. They traded him to the Reds, and he still has some trade value too. So if he does produce, teams are going to be interested in him at the trade deadline. Even if he's not producing, you still saw a team interested in him in the trade deadline as a depth piece. This isn't like, say, Nicky Lopez, who nobody wanted. But he was only dealt for cash considerations, although, hey, that is the Sox favorite player to get back in a trade. They love cash considerations or player to be named later. Like, that's the favorite type of player the White Sox like to get, figuratively. They love to get that cash back because they're always claiming poverty. But if you're asking them to have a bounce back season, first, you'll be at least getting then a solid player. He has produced a 2.1 F4 season in 2022. He had a 1.5 F4 in 2021. So you're at least going to get a solid, decent player if he has a bounce back season. Second, you'll be getting a player who had a 288 average and an 800 OPS in 2023 against lefties. He had a 277 average and an 824 OPS against southpaws in 2022. See, you're starting to see. He's had a history of crushing left-handed hitters. And that's not a terrible bet, considering you can then control the runway. Dominic Fletcher gets to prove he might just be the answer in right field. At least buy yourself some more time until you identify the solution in right field, because remember, they're still trying to replace Jermaine Dye, and he retired in 2009. So maybe you're identifying that solution in the draft, or again, it gives you some more time to allow stud prospect George Wolcott to solve a strikeout problem. And he's also years away. So, maybe that is your solution, is George Wolcott. I'm hoping he is, because, man, the guy's a stud. But he strikes out a lot, and he's still only 18. Think about it. This should have technically been his draft year. And the Sox got lucky because, he was technically, he went to junior college instead, and he signed. He reclassified. So you were able to get him, basically steal a first-round pick. But he's going to take a little bit of time, so buy yourself some time. And Fletcher hit just 176 against lefties. So, again, by bringing in Slater, you could be like, hey, Todd, you slammed the organization, as every day has heard, for, wasting his runway, in 2024 to play Tommy Pham. They're bringing in now another veteran that might get in his way. Well, this is going to be putting him on the right runway, though, because you're just going to ask Dominic Fletcher not to hit against lefties. And in this case, like I said, you need to buy some time for George Wolcott to be ready. Or on the flip side, maybe you're going to use this year's draft to finally find your right field, solve your right field problem. And also, there's another prospect that I'll talk about in the next segment you could tap into, but you're giving yourself time when you're not going to be competitive right now. And also, again, you're going to put him on the right runway. You're going to put Fletcher on the right runway to develop as a big leaguer. And he was denied much of that in 2024. But again, this is at least going to allow him to have some playing time and get some more regular at-bats, because you should just be using Slater against lefties then and hoping for the bounce-back season. And again, both guys can play good defense. Slater plays it well. Fletcher plays it elite. So you're definitely getting some run prevention there. You're getting guys that are going to be able to have the range to prevent some runners from getting on base. They have the ability to steal hits. And Slater gets on base. Career 342 on base percentage. Had a 12.3% walk rate in 2024. So he still understands the strike zone, and that is something that new director of hitting, Ryan Fuller, wants hitters to have. By the way, check out the White Sox Talk recent podcast with Chuck Garfien. He did the interview with Ryan Fuller. Oh, that's some sexy baseball. Definitely speaking my language. Wants power hitting, but wants then the guys to understand the situation that they're in. Man, I really hope he institutes, hey, if you're any 2 strikes, let's just get some contact. Otherwise, you got any other accounts, let's drive the ball as hard as we can. I'm hoping that gets instituted organizational wide. And plus, it never hurts to add veterans who played for winning organizations. He's part of that amazing, overachieving 2021 San Francisco Giants team. Those are the guys that you want to be adding into your clubhouse. So, yes, while it's not something that we should be like, hey, this is going to help us win a lot of games, it's at least a very solid signing that you should expect for what the Sox are going to be spending this year. So, major 40-man roster decisions have to be made today, as at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, prospects eligible for the December's Rule 5 draft must be added to the 40-man roster to be protected from exposure. So let's discuss who the Sox must add next on Locked On White Sox. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And I always maintain FanDuel's spreads, over, under, and money lines are fun to play. But if you want to win big or at least double your money, FanDuel's parlays, props, and futures is the way to go. Chicago scoring first against Minnesota this Sunday, and it being a touchdown is a chance to almost triple your money, is because it's at plus 290. So say you put $10 on that and it hits, you can win $29. And it is plus 290 for the Bears scoring first and it being a field goal too. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all my everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox or wherever they get their podcasts, as the show is available on all major podcast platforms. And hey, I'd appreciate a 5-star review if you're listening via podcast. All right, so adding Slater to the team puts the White Sox, by my math, at 37 players on their 40-man roster. Now, they got to add top hitting prospect Colson Montgomery before 5 p.m. today to avoid exposing him to the Rule 5 draft. So that should put the roster at 38. And they need to add at least 4 more players, according to FutureSox.net James Fox. And I'm fully on board with his reasoning. And again, read it, FutureSox.net. James, friend of the show. I got to get him back on the show too. And then I do think there are 2 prospects that are in the gray area. So you could be talking about potentially needing to add 6 more players to your 40-man roster when you only got, you're already at 38. So some decisions are going to have to be made today. Montgomery obviously is a no-brainer. Still considered the 37th best prospect in all of baseball per MLB Pipeline. He hit .214 at AAA, but still crushed 18 home runs, had an OPS over 700. So if you're thinking, well, he had a terrible average at AAA Charlotte and it's a hitter's ballpark, you're right. You're fully right to be concerned, but he still screams that he's going to make the big leagues. It's just, where's he going to range from? Is it going to be his floor, which is Paul DeYoung that I keep, every day or hear me keep saying? Or is it Corey Seager? His ceiling. And he still should be considered a foundational piece because he did have a very strong September at AAA Charlotte, and then he had a very strong Arizona Fall League. So obviously there's still that high ceiling player there. And again, maybe working with Ryan Fuller will get him to that Corey Seager-like potential. But then the math gets tricky as, who do you need to outright off the roster or cut or non-tender? And I'd say right off the bat, Chucky Robinson. Get him off my roster. Love that he hits without batting gloves, but still, you can find, you're going to be targeting a backup catcher anyway. Empty that roster spot then. Steven Wilson, get him off my roster. Jacob Amaya, Gavin Sheets, definitely. I'm sorry. He's never going to be nothing more than a 10 home run hitter off the bench. You can find something better. Heck, even Andrew Vaughn. Okay, but some decisions are going to have to be made because they got to add at least 4 more players that James Fox of FutureSox.net points out. Pitcher Juan Carela Juan Carela, I'm going to be butchering these names, Trey McGough, and Anthony Hoopy Tuatawina. And then outfielder Wilfred Veras. These three pitchers obviously could be nice, cheap bullpen arms during the rebuild and then possibly when the Sox are competitive. And think about it. The Sox blew so many leads, especially in their bullpen, that they can't afford to lose any arms that project to help the bullpen soon. So these are three guys that you should be getting onto your 40-man roster. Get some of these, terrible guys off your roster. Like, again, Steven Wilson. Get them off there. Also, if you want to effectively use the Rule 5 draft, because remember, there's a cost involved. So if you want to effectively use the Rule 5 draft, you probably want to target bullpen arms because you got to pay $100K to get the player. And then you got to keep that player on the 26-man roster for the entire season or return said player back to the original team for $50K. So bullpen arms are usually the way to go if you're going to really leverage the Rule 5 draft. And if you want more on like who's eligible, it's on MLB.com. But you can stash those guys at the back of the pen, use them for low leverage situations. And then who knows? Maybe they show something in those low leverage situations. Usually they don't show anything, but you never know. Gus Farland's a former Rule 5 draft, not obviously with the White Sox, but he's a former guy. So at least it exposes them to the big league level. You can get a look. You never know. So that's why those three should be added because they would be prime. We're going to take these guys. It would be definitely worth kicking the tires on those three, especially since Carela is rated as the Sox 26th best prospect. And I've seen him, every time I turned on Birmingham Barons in the second half, he usually was pitching and he's got very, very impressive stuff. Hoopy Tuatawina. I remember when he was required in the Robbie Grossman trade, I went back and definitely made sure I could, master his name. And then it's been so long since I've had to say his name that I probably just butchered his name, but came to the White Sox in the Robbie Grossman deal with Texas. McGough. I think it's McGough. He came over in the Eloy Jimenez deal with the Baltimore Orioles. AHT, as I'll just say, he was briefly considered a White Sox top 30 prospect. For some draft prospects dropped him out of the ranking, but those are three guys that I could see you should actually be inviting to camp and see, can they help you in your bullpen? Veras has the best raw power according to MLB Pipeline in the White Sox system. He's their 25th ranked prospect. He hit 16 home runs at AA Birmingham, and this is what Fox wrote about him. Wilfred Veras was originally signed as an international free agent by the White Sox out of the Dominican Republic, and he's hit 57 minor league home runs. The 21-year-old, he's 21, bats and throws from the right side, and he posted a 118 WRC plus this year with the Birmingham Barons. He slashed 267, 319, 424 on the year overall, and he could be expected to start next season in AAA with Charlotte. He previously posted 129 WRC plus to close out the 2023 season in the Southern League as well. Veras strikes out too much, doesn't walk enough, and doesn't have a position defensively to rely on. He's still really young, however, and possesses big raw power and some feel to hit. So this is a guy that you could potentially see, maybe do see, could he be a solution in right field, even though he doesn't have a great position, because if the ball gets over his head, at least it's a double, and you got Dominic Fletcher through the rest of the decade to be a late inning defensive replacement. So this is a guy that you probably should protect. Two prospects in the gray area are Addison Coffey, as he was a guy that, I was harping on to give a cup of coffee, pun intended, but to, give a shot in the bullpen in September, because he did, he could be a solid bullpen arm. And then outfielder DJ Gladney, he's another power hitter, had a decent Arizona Fall League. However, I doubt Gladney, and they could maybe risk Veras to get picked, as again, you have to keep these guys on the roster for an entire season. And there's a good chance of hitters technically usually being overmatched. All right. You ever hear of Enrique Cruz? The only reason why I have was because when I worked for the Brewers in the 2003 season, he was a Rule 5 draft guy that they had, and they had to keep him on the roster, and he barely ever played. They kind of used him as a pinch runner and the ceremonial first pitch catcher. Okay. Because it's very hard to make that leap from AA to the big leagues as a hitter. You could say, well, Oscar Colas did it. He was very impressive. Yeah, he did it, but they gave him a taste. And out of that, you saw what happened once the league started to get some stuff on him. He then had to go back to AAA. because that's where they sent him back. And then, he had to get his footing back from an injury and that type of stuff. And then he came back and, there's still something there, obviously. So there's nothing wrong with maybe taking a guy from AA to the big leagues to give a taste just to see. But then you want to, kind of follow what they did with Brian Ramos. What you don't want to do, though, is it's very, there is that option in the 7 of the minors. With the Rule 5, you don't have that option. They have to stay on the major league roster. So basically you're working with a 25-man roster. So since it's hard to make that leap as a hitter, they could potentially say, you know what, we're gonna risk Gladney, we're gonna risk Veras. Because usually, the only guy that I can think of was Josh Hamilton, but even then that's a former top overall pick that has really made that leap in that first year. Usually these guys then get stashed. They sit on the bench. They're pinch runners. They're pinch hitters every now and again in low leverage situations, and they catch the ceremonial first pitch. So you could leave those guys unprotected, although they could all of a sudden be hurt, and you put them on the 60-day IL because an IL stint is another way to stash a Rule 5 guy. But remember, these cost $100K. So, for some teams, they might be like, you know what, it's not worth it. And again, the guideline of who qualifies is on MLB.com. All right, well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow with a Way Back Wednesday. And also, I want to discuss, could the Tampa Bay Rays stadium issue ease some of the fears that the Sox could relocate to Nashville? I want to discuss that. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding Luis Robert Jr. being the player who must step up in 2025, the Sox signing Austin Slater actually being a good free agent addition, and who the Sox must add to the 40-man roster to protect from the Rule 5 draft exposure. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow.